the scent of potpourri, films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a weekly movie and TV podcast reviewing one or two new release titles every episode with an occasional free-for-all segment at the end that we call Potpourri. You can find more of our work, including written reviews and the complete backlog of our episodes at obsessiveviewer.com. And if you'd like to support us and get access to hundreds of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, where you can get access to one of our monthly tier levels. Geez, I needed to proofread that. Where you can join at one of our monthly tier levels for exclusive content. There we go. Or you can buy individual collections a la carte in the Patreon shop section. Again, that's at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. This week on the Patreon, I am posting my 6th award season potpourri, Patreon potpourri episode, which is a full-length episode in which I review 4 movies I've watched for award season. This next episode is going to cover my thoughts on Next Goal Wins, John Wick Chapter 4, The Zone of Interest, and Past Lives, so see that on Patreon soon. And then I'm also a little bit delayed on starting my Full Dark No Stars reviews for Stephen King's Full Dark No Stars, but I will be posting my review of 1922, the novella, soon. So once again, you can sign up at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer for all that and a bunch more content. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find me on social media, which includes Letterboxd at the username ObsessiveViewer, and on TikTok at OV Podcasts. And in our feature review this week, we'll be reviewing Sam Esmail's new film, Leave the World Behind, which is currently streaming on Netflix. And then we will have a secondary review later in the show in which we will be reviewing John Woo's latest movie, Silent Night, which opened in theaters on December 1st. In addition to that, we'll also be discussing the 2023 IFJA Award Nominees that were just announced today as of this recording. But of course, before we do any of that, let me introduce this week's guests. Joining me tonight are my friends and IFJA colleagues and return guests to The Obsessive Viewer, Andy Carr and Joe Shearer. Andy's written reviews can be found at filmyap.substack.com with contributing pieces at midwestfilmjournal.com as well. He's also the host of the Odd Trilogies Podcast, in which he and his co-host Logan tackle 3 movies every ep that share some connective tissue, whether it be thematic or cast or crew specific. You can also find him on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Dandible, which is like mandible, but with a D. And Joe Shearer, his work can be found on MidwestFilmJournal.com as well. He's also frequently featured on the Medium Cool Movie Podcast. And coming up soon, he'll be heard on Film Sociology with fellow IFJA member Matt Sosi to review The Iron Claw. And he can also be found on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Joe R. Shearer. Now that I have just vomited all of those words out in a quick succession, welcome back to the show, Andy and Joe. How have you guys been? And thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having us. Great to be back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Always fun to come on and talk to you.
Yes, It is always fun to bug you guys into committing a large chunk of your evening to chatting with me.
I personally look forward to the messages where you're like, okay, who wants to be on this? And then it's like a grab bag. It's like, I'll be on that one and that one.
Yeah. I always get mad because I miss it. And then it's like an hour in and I'm like, 4 people have already volunteered. I was like, why can't I be on there too?
It's so funny to me how you guys have that perspective on it, whereas my perspective is like, okay, I'm going to type this out. Okay. Okay. I'm just going to send it. And then if I don't hear anything, it's fine. It's okay. I'll just do it's fine.
You feel like you're badgering us?
Kind of.
Not at all.
Good. Well, I am going to definitely keep doing that. But no, it's funny because this is a spoiler for the end of the episode, but next week on the show, I'm going to be reviewing Poor Things and Saltburn with Mitch. And And it's funny because he saved me from my planned episode in which I was going to review Wonka. Was not very much looking forward to that, but he messaged me and was like, "Hey, I have been dying to talk about Poor Things. Can I please come on the show?" I was like, "Yeah, of course." So we're going to be doing that next week. And then, so
it's always, to me, it's always like, I always look at it like, you're asking me to do what we do every day anyway. Like,
yeah.
It's like, oh no, not that.
Yeah. Fair enough. So like I said, today on the show, we're going to be reviewing Leave the World Behind and Silent Night. I did forget to mention this up top, but the podcast, all of the Obsessive Viewer podcasts, so Obsessive Viewer, Tower Junkies, and Anthology, are now available to listen to on YouTube and YouTube Music. So basically, I just put the podcast on YouTube. It's just a video, like the video component of that is just the background of like the cover art for the episodes and everything. But just another way for you guys to find the podcast. If you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, basically it'll just alert you whenever a podcast is posted. So feel free to do that. I'll put links in the show notes and everything. But very excited about that because YouTube is big and people Google things on YouTube more than Google. So hopefully people find us. So yeah. Okay, so shall we kind of commence with the episode? Do you guys want to talk about the nominations?
Sure.
Yeah. So today, actually, let me backtrack a little bit and give a spotlight to our friends at Midwest Film Journal. As I said last week, the current essay series on Midwest Film Journal is all about Samuel L. Jackson. It's the Hold On to Your Butts essay series, which I not to toot my own horn, but I think I coined that or I suggested that. And I was very proud of that. But my review posts on December 22nd. It's about Unbreakable. Are you guys contributing anything to that, or has it posted? Like where are you guys at with the Hold On to Your Butts series?
I have two of them. My first one was Die Hard with a Vengeance. I know that I think that one posted already. I need to, as a matter of fact, I need to look. And then I'm also doing, what's the other one I'm doing? Jackie Brown.
Oh, nice.
If the theme is tooting our own horn, I am exceedingly proud of both of these.
Nice.
So I do feel there's sometimes when I write things. And yes, Die Hard with a Vengeance posted on December 6th.
Nice.
And like I said, I often write reviews or write essays or pieces about movies, and it's kind of a slog to get through them. But for both of those, I was exceedingly proud of what I did on both of them. So, check it out. Check them out on Midwest Film Journal and let me know if you think I had reason to be proud of them, or if I should be ashamed of myself.
No, I'm sure that it's great writing. I'm very excited to read the Die Hard with a Vengeance one. I love that movie so much.
Yeah, and watching it again with a few years perspective, it's a movie I've seen many times, but kind of watching and thinking about what I was going to write about it went off in directions that I didn't really think it would go in, and I was, that's one of the reasons I'm so happy with it is that, and also stay tuned for my Jackie Brown essay where I call it a better film than Pulp Fiction. So,
interesting. Wow. Hot take.
I was watching it and I was like, you know what? Maybe it is. And the more I watched it, I was like, man, this movie is so good. And nobody talks about it. Everybody talks about damn Pulp Fiction. As much as I love it. I was like, you know what? This is better. Screw it. It's better than Pulp Fiction. So nice. I said it. So,
you actually are in good company. My co-host over at Odd Trilogies, Logan, Jackie Brown is his favorite Tarantino movie.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I might say that. I might say that as well. It's severely underrated at the very least. Like people don't talk about it. And I remember it was hardly a box office hit. Like it was, I think it was modestly successful. And I remember seeing it in the theater and then seeing the box office, and I was like, man, that movie was a lot better than whatever it made its opening weekend, 6 million or 9 million or something crazy.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's a way better movie than that. And then, and time has been very good to it. I think it just kind of keeps getting better.
Yeah, it's a good one. I like it a lot. It's one that grew on me because I kind of discovered Quentin Tarantino when I was in high school, and it was like, oh, Pulp Fiction is the greatest. And then Jackie Brown was like, oh, this is weird. This isn't what I was expecting.
Yeah, it doesn't have the same quirkiness, but
right?
But it has its own quirkiness too. So
yeah.
And Samuel L. Jackson is just the glue of that movie. I go so far into his character, like I couldn't even believe the things like I was thinking about as I was watching that movie. I was just like, oh yes, like you can see. And also I guess the character that he and Robert De Niro played in that were also in another movie that came out several years later. There was a younger version of them. Mos Def played Ordell Roby, and I can't remember who played Louis Gara in that.
Wow.
But I can't remember now, but it was I think Jennifer Aniston was in that movie. But yeah. Anyway, Elmore Leonard is a damn genius.
Mm-hmm.
Rest his soul. And he's the author of Rum Punch, which Jackie Brown is based on.
Mm-hmm.
Also Out of Sight and 3:10 to You, a million movies and a million great books.
Yeah.
I interviewed him once years ago. Spoke
Nice.
to him on the phone for about 25 minutes, and it was fantastic. We talked a lot about Justified, which at the time
nice.
I'd never watched. So,
Mm.
but since I watched quite a bit of it and enjoyed it.
Nice. Awesome. Well, yeah, you can find Joe's work at MidwestFilmJournal.com. And again, follow him on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Joe R. Shearer. And Andy, what do you have on the docket? Are you contributing anything to the Sam Jackson series on Midwest Film Journal?
No, I'll go ahead and toot my own shortcoming there. But no, I was going to write a piece on the Star Wars prequels about his turn as Mace Windu, but just been busy these last couple weeks and opted out of it. But Evan Dossie wrote a wonderful piece on that exact topic for the series, so definitely go check that out.
Absolutely.
I think next thing I've got coming out is our Odd Trilogies episode on the A Christmas Story sequels. There are 3
nice.
sequels to the original A Christmas Story, most of which I would guess few people have heard of and even fewer have seen. The most recent one was like just last year, I think.
Yeah.
A Christmas Story sequel or A Christmas Story Christmas.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll be talking about those, and then I think my next review is Rebel Moon, the new Zack Snyder movie. So we'll see how that goes.
That should be. So let's talk about the IFJA nominations.
Anyway,
it should be something.
It should be. I'm like, we'll see.
yeah.
But yeah, so the IFJA, we announced our nominees today. We're going to be announcing the winners on this coming Monday, the 18th. So I'll have basically what my plan is that Monday when the winners are unveiled on Patreon, I'm going to have a full episode that's just me talking about the winners and everything. And then the end of the year, I'm going to have an episode of Obsessive Viewer where we run down the IFJA 10 best films of 2023. We did that last year and I think the year before. Very excited about it as like kind of a new tradition, I guess. But that's all to come. But let's talk about the nominees. What did you guys? What were you guys excited about getting the nomination or making the cut? And why do we have 20 best film nominees?
Well, that's something that we do every year.
Yeah.
We of course you guys know, but maybe listeners don't know that.
Yeah.
Our process is a little different than some.
To be clear, I'm being facetious to the listener. Like, yes, it's fine.
Yeah. So,
we just get a lot of flack from people online.
Yes, we get lots. Yeah, as a matter of fact, even today we had people comment. People saying, "Oh, they just nominated everything," and it's like, well, we just nominate a lot, and then the winners are, much fewer. So,
right,
it's just we have a more open and, as we've said, we used to call it a more transparent process, where we kind of, all of our members throw in, and then we do, now we're doing a new system this year, right, with where we are, we kind of are endorsing films that we want to support as a nominee, and there are certain like thresholds, like point thresholds and things. And, this is where we're at. So, but, we will have, as usual, we'll have a final top 10, a best film and a runner up. And then we'll have winners in the, individual winners and a runner up in each category, each subsequent category, as usual. So it doesn't mean anything other than we have a little more of a wide open process at the outset.
Yeah.
So, Joe, it sounds like at the end of the day, we're going to have about the same number of winners and honorees as everybody else.
Yeah.
So
it's funny how that works out. Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. Including, we have every year, and I hope to continue that tradition, including an actual physical trophy that we give out for the Ed Johnson Ott Hoosier Award, which I have been in charge of, getting the actual statue made every year. So it's something when I say I look forward to it, it's sort of a labor of love, because then it's a pain in the ass most of the time. But I like doing it, and I like giving it away. Yeah, I like awarding it to people and getting pictures of them with it. So
nice.
It's been a that's one that has gone to people who are high profile and people who are a little less high profile sometimes, but always deserving. And it's a special award and named after a special person too. I don't know that either of you guys actually knew Ed, but
I don't think I ever had the pleasure.
I met him once. I had a conversation once, but I never personally knew him.
He was an absolutely fantastic guy, and he's one of those people that you would say, he's somebody I kind of want to be like. And that he's when I first started doing reviews in the mid 2000s, he'd already been going for years and years. I'd read his stuff, and he's just the warmest, nicest guy. And it's a distinct honor to add his name to that. He passed away a few years ago, and it's a great honor to have that named after him, and hopefully, let a few people know who are not from around here. Most of the people who are around here who've been in the scene for a while know his name, and for everyone else, hopefully, it just gives him a little bit of recognition, and he would be very proud of that too. So. I have a lot of great stories about Ed too, but we'll have to share those at a different time.
Yeah. I remember I don't think I ever really met him, but I do remember like the morning when everyone was talking about his passing and everything. I like made a point. I set aside time to just go and read a bunch of his work and everything. So I definitely have a lot of admiration for his body of work.
Absolutely, yeah. Great guy too. Just like principled and unafraid, like courageous as can be. All right, I'm going to tell the one story. One time, so Ed was a gay man, and just not that's not germane to anything other than the story, which is that we were at a screening one time, and there was a local radio personality who was very well known and respected and liked. He's a nice guy, but he's a radio guy, and he's whatever. And he was having a conversation with someone. And the screenings as we do them today are not the like party events they used to be. They used to like giveaways, and they'd have prizes, and radio people would come and do their shtick, and they'd broadcast whatever, sometimes from the theater.
Old Hollywood.
Yeah. So anyway, this one local radio personality was there, and he very loudly was talking to someone and said, "Oh, that's so gay." And and this is the early 2000s, maybe 2004, 2005, time frame when people were still saying that. Yeah. And Ed went right on the spot. Like, I watched it happen, like in real time, like walked right up to him and like addressed him by name and was like, "Listen, you were so much better than that." And he like, nice. he just like chastised him for saying that. And this was like when saying something is gay as like an insult was starting to wane. People were stopping it, but it was still going on. And he just very matter of factly went right up to him and just like in front of everyone and was like, "You were so much better than that." And the guy like stopped, and he was like, "You know what? You're right. I apologize, and I shouldn't have said that." Like right there on the spot. And I was like, that could have gone in many ways.
Oh yeah.
and
that's amazing.
Like, didn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And that's kind of just like who he was. And also said it in just like, it felt like your dad saying he was disappointed in you, you know, and so that's kind of like my prototypical, I guess, story about Ed, was just sitting there watching him doing that. Because when it happened, I was just kind of like, oh boy.
Yeah.
And then he just got right up. There's another one that I can't tell. Yet,
Okay.
but it's much longer than that one, but it's a very similarly themed story, and it's a little bit funnier, but yeah. So anyway, great.
That's incredible.
What movie was the screening for?
I have no idea. I could not remember.
I'm thinking of the important details.
I don't recall what movie it was. But yeah,
Chuck and Larry.
I mean, yeah, there were dozens of them that we right. Chuck and Larry. No, I know it wasn't that one because I didn't go to that one as a screening, but I couldn't even begin to tell you what movie it was.
Yeah,
we did dozens. I mean, they were literally every week back then. Sometimes
awesome.
2 and 3 a week. So it would be hard to remember that one.
Yeah, well, the landscape has changed, but the IFJA has still nominated 20 movies for Best Picture. So.
Yes.
And we're never going to stop.
And we're never going to stop. But I don't intend for us to run down every category or anything. Just like, what are some movies that you guys were passionate about stumping for and excited that it got the nomination for any category?
I was really happy with the recognition that John Wick Chapter 4 got. I've been kind of inside and outside of the IFJA kind of been stumping that movie all year. Just blew me away as a action masterclass, and we got it into Best Film, Chad Stahelski for Best Director, and then I think Editing, Cinematography, and Choreography.
Editing, yes. Yeah. Cinematography, yes. And stunt movement choreography,
yeah. So just, I mean, for a just all-out action movie, like not really like it is a franchise movie, but it's not like a, family adventure movie or a Marvel movie or anything. Just an all-out, balls to the wall action movie to get that kind of widespread recognition felt really special in the group. And, I know that I harassed people to no end to throw their support behind it, but it paid off.
And here's the thing, me included too. Like, it worked for me because
both of you, because you were, I think, the last two that I
know.
harangued.
If I remember correctly, Joe, you hadn't seen any of the John Wick movies, and
that remains the only one I've actually watched.
Yeah, and I
watched it last week.
Yeah, and I hadn't seen a John Wick movie since the original in like 2015, or 2014. So it's been like 9 years, and it's one of those things where the way my brain works, it sucks, but like if the fourth installment, I need to see the other three. It's been 9 years since I've seen the first John Wick, so I need to rewatch John Wick and then watch 2 and 3. And then I'm just like, well, I'll do that eventually, because now I need to watch as many things currently to for nominations and everything. And so, like, with Andy, with you stumping for it, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and watch it. And I watched it, and my God, that was just incredible. Incredible. Like you said, wall-to-wall action. The set pieces were incredible. And, like, especially in a year where I went into this year, 2023, with the expectation that, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is going to blow me away. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be insane. And it was good, but it didn't blow me away or anything. And throughout the year, I was just like, okay, well, nothing's really blowing my mind on the action front, including the movie that we're going to do a secondary review on tonight. But but then John Wick just stole my heart. It was wonderful. Yeah.
Well, it does a great job too. I mean, with you not watching the middle two entries, it does a great job of not that these are complex movies, but really brings you up to speed and gets you on its wavelength immediately. And it's like, as long as you're down for Keanu Reeves killing a bunch of people to, you know, stay alive, then you're on board.
I was really stupid proud of my tweet the tweet that I twatted when I was watching it. That was like me being someone who has only seen the first John Wick nine years ago, watching John Wick Chapter 4. Man, these people really take hotel management seriously. So I was very proud of that.
Well, for me, the one I think I'll say my notable failure is Air. I pushed on that quite a bit. Not you know, with my words so much as just like adding it to the list. We snuck a couple in ensemble acting. Viola Davis has his Best Supporting Performance nominee. I really love that movie. I was kind of sad it didn't get a little more. But you know, just kind of, I'm just like scrolling through the list. Of course, Barbie is a favorite for me, which I saw it late, very late in the game. I'm happy Blackberry is getting a little bit of attention because that was really good and very under the radar. Poor Things, I think I was one of the first people in our group to see it, and I nominated it first for pretty much everything it's nominated for. But I'm glad that it, you know, a lot of people have seemed to like it. I'm nominated When Evil Lurks as Best Foreign Language Film.
Yes.
I don't know how much traction it's going to get, but I hope it gets some as a horror film, and I absolutely love it.
Same.
Yeah. So, just, you know, there's kind of a lot of things that kind of just are there that it's just fun to see. And I do like, there's one of the things I like is our kind of left of center choices like John Wick and Bottoms is another one that we have nominated for a few things.
Yes, including choreography, which I'm very pleased with. That movie is phenomenal. Especially with that.
Yeah, I don't know what else. I'm just kind of scrolling through. Of course, I'm a big Marvel guy, so Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, even being a Sony, you know, and that was just such a great movie. I'm kind of gearing up for the backlash because we sometimes do that. I'll certainly go back now and look at, for example, we chose How to Train Your Dragon over Toy Story 3 years ago. And looking back, I'm like, you know, we were just being contrarian because Toy Story 3 was damn good. And, you know, How to Train Your Dragon was fine. But we kind of have that weird thing with animation where we go against the popular choice. And I think that's what this is going to be, especially with a movie like Robot Dreams, which is very good also.
Yes.
But I think Across the Spider-Verse really is going to, I hope it's going to win a lot for us and in different groups as well, because it's so damn good.
And that one too. I mean, Across the Spider-Verse also, more than any other animated nominee, has gotten a lot of traction in several other categories. Which I always like seeing an animated film. You know, I think in our group we're a little more open to that than a lot of groups. It feels like, okay, well, we'll give the animated movies the animated nomination and kind of leave it at that. And I like that we include them in all sorts of other stuff. I mean, Boy and Heron, Robot Dreams, Suzume, and Spider-Man are all in different categories too. It's such a good, you know, it's such a great thing because animated films they just get short shrift, and they're called kids movies, and they're, you know, I've been saying for years it's always been one of my pet peeves when I would talk to someone about an animated movie, and I used to have to interview people, you know, and like get their opinions. And whenever it was an animated movie, I was always just like, because I always know the first thing that's going to come out of their mouth is, "Oh, it was cute," you know. And I was like, every damn time. And so I finally just started saying, like, listen, you can't say cute to describe it. You cannot use that word. Well, it was good for a kid's movie.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, and animation is such a great, you know, it's such a great art form. And it just, you know, I interviewed, sorry, I'm going to like keep name dropping. I interviewed Mamoru Oshii, who did Ghost in the Machine.
Oh, wow.
Years ago. And
Ghost in the Shell.
Ghost in the Shell. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry, Ghost in the Machine is something different. It was the sequel. The sequel came out, and they were like, "Oh, you want to interview him?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." I was like, and I'm not a particularly big anime fan, but I watched it and I was like, "Wow, that's amazing." And he talked about how in Japan that animation is not considered a kid's genre the way it is here,
right?
And it was just like, and that always kind of just stuck with me, and it's like, and there's internationally, it's not necessarily, just like, oh, this is something we throw our children in front of to shut them up for a couple of hours,
right?
It's really like given its full weight, and I've always kind of tried to take that, as take that to heart whenever I'm talking about an animated movie, and not just say things like, oh, your kids will love it, and maybe you won't hate it. It'll just be like, I want to dig into it a little more and give it its full respect, because it's very often, tremendous way to tell a story.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's open to so many, just so much originality, and I agree. Yeah. Let's see. So, like in terms of nominees that I'm excited about, or that I'm excited that got in, the aforementioned When Evil Lurks, just so delighted that's getting that got any recognition in the group for best foreign language. That's awesome. Love the love for Godzilla -1, which I just saw this past weekend. And just like it catapulted to the top of my top 10 list for tentatively. So, Dream Scenario is another one that I'm glad got some traction. I feel like The Holdovers is a movie that is, if not divisive within the group, it's at least something that is not... some people aren't too high on it, which is fine. That's, everyone's entitled to their wrong opinion. No, I'm kidding. But no, I loved The Holdovers, and I'm glad that it made the cut for our nominees in so many things, especially Dominic Sessa for Breakout of the Year. I think he was phenomenal. Him, and I'm also glad that Marshawn Lynch is on there. Just delightful. And of course, Aman Vellani for The Marvels.
She's just a treat.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And then the final thing on the nominees I'm going to ask you guys is that we have a few days until we meet to vote, deliberate, all of that. Fight, yes, duke it out. What movies are you planning on cramming in before the meeting? Like, what are some ones that you haven't given your attention to? While you guys are kind of thinking about that, I'll just throw out that I am woefully unprepared for documentary. I really need to just watch as many of them as I can. In particular, I'm eager to watch Greener Pastures, and Kokomo City I know has gotten a lot of love within the group, so I'm very eager to see that. The subject matter for Lakota Nation versus United States has piqued my interest, so I'm going to definitely check that out as well. Yeah. What about you guys? How about any blind spots that you're looking to open your eyes to? I don't know how to segue into that.
Greener Pastures is one for me. I would like to watch Godzilla -1 if I can get to the theater. There's a handful of movies. I haven't seen Killers of the Flower Moon yet. That's another one that I'm going to try to squeeze in. I think most of them. I feel like I've got a good enough grasp on most of them. I've seen most of these enough to have an opinion on them. There's been a couple that I even started and I was just like, this is just not going to do it. Let's see. I'm just kind of scrolling through. I think those are really the two that I'm really wanting to get worked in before. And then there's a couple of them that maybe didn't quite make it. Talk to Me is one that I want to watch that I haven't seen yet. That I'm, I don't know. I thought we had it nominated for something, but
I don't think so. It's I
think it got close. It got close.
It got close in a couple of categories. Yeah. I kind of laughed a lot to myself because I put it up for like one of the categories, and like forever up until like the deadline, I was the sole person to put it up for that.
Wait, which one?
Talk to Me. I think I had it up for like cinematography or something. But yeah, I love that movie.
It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that one.
I've been waiting for it for a long time.
I think I backed your nomination of Talk to Me for like original vision or something.
I think so too. Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of my kind of blind spots or things I want to cover before the meeting, I'm with you, Matt. A documentary is kind of my weakest category right now. I've seen most of them, but I still need to see 20 Days in Mariupol, if I'm pronouncing that right.
It's pronounced 20.
Turn Every Page. I don't know anything about that one. I've just seen it on the list for the last, several months and have been like, I should get to that at some point. But documentaries kind of consistently one. I enjoy documentaries, but this time of year it kind of gets hard to like cram those because it's a lot of information presented very matter-of-factly. So I really appreciate things like Kokomo City, which like has a real distinct format and attitude to it, and it's like talking about like a subculture that you don't see represented a lot in other media. But yeah, so documentary is probably my big one. I think honestly though, the most heavily supported film in our whole field that I haven't seen is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Oh yeah.
I gotta be honest, I don't know that I'll get to that one. It's I'm sure it's a perfectly well done movie. It's just everything I've read about it, positive reviews and negative, have just kind of indicated to me probably not for me. At most, that I might think it's fine. And at this point in the year, I'm kind of like past watching movies that I think will be fine. I want to watch it if it's going to be good.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's totally fair. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret is one that I haven't seen either. But I do admit, like, it is like right up my alley. Like those kind of like coming of age dramas like that are like things that I eat up. So I'm going to make time to see it. Yeah. I don't know if I'll be able to see it before the meeting, but
that's one that I started watching and I got about, halfway through it. And I was like, I kind of see what this is going to be, I think. And it's not going to it's not going to be it's not going to change my vote for any other thing.
Sure.
So I kind of just this, and unless people become outraged at us talking like this, like understand we literally had over 100 movies sent to us, and late
this critics group, every member doesn't watch every single movie from beginning to end. Like, come on.
Right. I admit, I think I'm at like 117 movies that have been released this year. That's what I've seen personally. Yeah. And I've still not seen a lot of these. I still got to watch, I don't know, maybe I watched about half of what was sent to us.
Yeah.
And and if I, that's kind of the way that it works. It's impossible for someone, to see everything that was made. And, we have to kind of prioritize a little bit. And so we have our ways of doing that. And, for us, it's, as we said, stumping for things. And sometimes it doesn't,
Well, and I think that goes back a little bit to what we were saying earlier about the like kind of discourse whenever we release our awards, is people are always like, oh, they guess they're nominating everything. And it's like, if you had any idea how much we actually watched and didn't nominate,
right?
You'd understand that this is an honor.
Yes. Yep.
Right.
And kind of on that same note, like I'm at like 93 movies that I've watched from this year of release.
Yeah.
And that's a light year for me, very light year for me. But like prioritizing movies to watch before the meeting, like I'm going to watch Poor Things tomorrow because Mitch and I are going to be reviewing it next week, and we're actually recording this week. Like there's like talking about economizing your time or really prioritizing things and having a time frame. Like I feel like I should watch Beau is Afraid. I don't want to watch Beau is Afraid, but I feel like I should watch Beau is Afraid. But it's also 3 hours long, and
it is. Yeah.
Well,
it's 3 hours long, and it's a very specific type of movie that like, and Matt, I don't want to oversay, I don't know you this well, but like there are some people for which like that's a movie that I would imagine being more like uncomfortable and upsetting than like rewarding. Like I have a friend who I watched it with, and he loves the movie, but almost kind of like he like loves it. He's like, I hate what this movie did to me, but I'm amazed that it did that to me, kind of thing. And yeah, there's just, I think there, like, my wife, I think, should probably never watch it. I think she's better off never watching it. So it's just one of those movies that kind of ticks into certain things that are just not fun for everybody to
That definitely piques my interest, honestly.
Yeah.
So
fair enough. Yeah. I know you like the weird shit.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you know how, and this is the thing, is like when people are like, oh, you're giving out awards and you should see everything. It's like, well, you know how you can watch a movie trailer and go, yes, I'm not going to see that movie ever.
Right.
That applies to us too, even, and that's not to say we're never surprised, but there are certain movies that we can just kind of like see the trailer or hear descriptions and go, yeah, this is not a movie that I'm going to probably like enough.
Right.
Certainly not enough to consider seriously for an award.
Yeah. Yep. But speaking of movies that we like, I can't transition into the review.
Segue.
Let's move on to our featured review of the night, which is for Leave the World Behind, which is currently streaming on Netflix as of December 8th. So and just to kind of wrap up the nomination talk, the IFJA nominations came out today, of course. Link in the show notes to where you can find all the nominees, and the winners will be announced on Monday the 18th. And if you're on Patreon, if you're a supporter on Patreon, you'll get access to me talking for probably a couple hours about the winners. So feel free to join at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. So guys, let's go into the featured review. Like I said, Leave the World Behind. It's on Netflix. Of course, we're going to do a non-spoiler and then spoiler review. Once we move on to spoilers, I'll play a clip from the trailer. There's also timestamps in the show notes of the episode, which can be found in the podcast app you're listening to this on, or at obsessiveviewer.com/OV406. Oh yes, 406. The premise, according to IMDb, is a family's getaway to a luxurious rental home takes an ominous turn when a cyber attack knocks out their devices and two strangers appear at their door. Director was Sam Esmail of Mr. Robot fame. Writer was Sam Esmail, based on the novel by Rumaan Alam. And the cast includes Julia Roberts, Mahershala Ali, Ethan Hawke, Myhala, and Kevin Bacon. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing any of that. So
apologies to Kevin Bacon.
Yes. So this movie is an interesting kind of isolationist, fear, disaster-y kind of movie with a lot of mystery surrounding it. How did you guys feel about Leave the World Behind in non-spoilers?
Yeah. I thought it was a bit of a treat, a delight for me, I would even say, an unexpected one. It's not one I had heard a whole lot about. I mean, obviously it's got a pretty big cast. I mean, Julia Roberts is as big as it gets, and it's surprising to see her in a movie like this, but it's also fun to see her, step out of that comfort zone a little bit. And I assume this is something she wanted to do, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, Ethan Hawke, Mahershala Ali, Kevin Bacon in a smaller role, but it's very good. And it's a movie that these movies like this, what you would call an apocalyptic kind of movie or an end of the world sort of thing. It can turn into a big effects extravaganza or a Mad Max, Book of Eli kind of Walking Dead sort of thing, or it can be something smaller like this, a little smaller in scale. And be just as effective. And it's I love movies like this for like world building, and it kind of occurred to me that this is a movie that with the kind of the revelations, it could be a series of movies. This is something that could be 10 different movies. It could be its own little universe. Not that we need another one of those necessarily, but but there's just that potential there, because there's a lot of there's obviously there are big things happening, but we see a very small slice of it, and from a very specific perspective of a family or a couple of families. So it's a very interesting movie. It certainly is worth a watch, and is something that is maybe not getting the attention it should get this year.
I agree. Andy, how did you feel about Leave the World Behind?
Yeah, I had a blast with it. I mean, it's kind of like, I almost want to liken it to a slower burn, larger ensemble 10 Cloverfield Lane. Where it's kind of like small perspective version of a giant disaster movie. And yeah, I mean, it's just, you've got this stacked cast and everybody's great. And I love Ethan Hawke in anything. I will watch him in just about anything he shows up in. And Mahershala Ali is always fun to watch. And he's really great in this as like, he's more mild man. I mean, he's always like a very kind of composed person, or frequently a very composed person in movies. But like here, he felt very ordinary in a weird way that I really liked. He felt very kind of casual and cool. And yeah, Julia Roberts was a lot of fun. She's like super kind of what I would call low-key racist the whole time. And that's fun to watch. Her see kind of this like, typical sort of ignorant centrist white woman. And so, it's just a lot of fun character dynamics bouncing off each other. And I will say, as it neared the end, I was kind of like, is this really going to like pay off all the tension that it's built and all the conflicts between characters that it's established? And it kind of doesn't. But it ends on a note that caught me so off guard and was so funny, coming from a streaming only Netflix film, that I was like, you know what? I don't even care if like my questions weren't answered. Because that was kind of fucking awesome. We'll talk about that in spoilers, but it was such an interesting period at the end of the movie, at the end of the statement of the movie. But yeah, it's really interesting. This movie it didn't like blow me away. It's not going to make my top 10 or anything, but it did impress me with the way that it handled the characters. And especially like Ethan Hawke, we talked about him a little bit. He's great in everything. I love Ethan Hawke as well. He is such a like goofy but grounded character in this. Like it's so interesting. Kind of a doofus.
That's the perfect word.
Almost like kind of
he's a doofus who is like the way that he is the way that he kind of counterbalances Julia Roberts more like she's taken the mantle of being like realistically and logically, well, she's fearful of what's going on, and then she also has the racism and everything. And then Ethan Hawke is just like the kind of guy that's like, he's just like, yeah, well, it's their house, like let them stay, like it's fine. Like it's just he's just so like goofy. It's a lot of fun. Did either of you guys watch Mr. Robot at all? Because I've got to admit, I watched the first season, which was like, that was Sam Esmail's kind of big thing. And like, I could not get into it. I thought it was really, really just, I could not find a route into it. I didn't see why it deserved all the acclaim that it got. So that's one of the reasons why I was a little nervous going into Leave the World Behind. But did either of you watch it?
I did not.
No, I've not seen any of it. So
is that the show with
Rami Malek?
Rami Malek, I mean, I saw when
Academy Award winner Rami Malek.
I remember seeing like all the there were all sorts of clips and scenes that kind of went viral of like his performance and that sort of thing, and I was like, okay, this seems like a show that really wants to be the weirdest show you've ever seen.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is, but yeah.
It sort of gave me like a modern day X-Files kind of vibe where, and I again, I've not seen a single episode, but it's sort of that like, it got like mainstream attention and is sort of a sci-fi-ish thing, but is also like, I don't know, maybe there's some like paranoia things going on. Yeah. But that's kind of the vibe it gave me. And I danced around the idea of watching it and I just never did. And I was just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. The first season didn't really do much for me. And I admit that it was kind of, I don't know, I kind of came to it with the baggage of knowing that it had all the hype. And like some of the hype that I had seen, I remember it being, and I swear we'll get back to the Leave the World Behind review, but some of the hype that I had seen included like people talking about how like, oh, it's the greatest show ever because all the hacking that they do in the show is like real hacking, like they're actually doing the stuff and everything. And I'm like, oh, okay, that
very cool.
Yeah, that like a compelling story that does not make. And then like I know this is going to be so snobby and so like maybe I'm just not the audience for it, but like I remember like the first episode I was watching it and I was like, oh, this is going to be crazy because like he's a hacker and he's going to hack stuff and everything. And then like he does, like the cold open of the series is that someone wrongs him or someone does something that pisses him off and he basically goes, he is setting up to hack into the guy's Facebook or hack into like one of his accounts or something. And like, it's just, this is a real tactic and everything, but it's just, it was just him Googling the guy, finding all of the personal information he could, and then guessing what the password was.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, it's boring. It didn't do anything for me. But anyway, all that's to say, watching Leave the World Behind made me kind of curious to maybe revisit Mr. Robot with fresh eyes. In particular, I feel like there were some very interesting kind of imagery in the movie. Just, I mean, from some of the scant like disaster footage, or if you want to call it that, but also like just the way the camera just operated and moved around the sets and the use of like Dutch angles and like moving into a different scene while swerving into like a Dutch angle was like really, really immersive. And I really enjoyed that. I thought that was, it made the almost 2.5 hour runtime kind of breeze by a little bit. Cause it just flowed really well.
Yeah. It created such a disorienting kind of, had such a disorienting kind of feel that it, and it pulled you in. And that's certainly what the whole vibe of the movie is, that we're trying to figure out what's going on. What is this that's happening? And no one really knows. And we get, these little pieces of information, and it was just really very interesting the way that they use those shots to kind of add to that tension a little bit. And there's this one moment that's sort of kind of the point where the movie really kind of kicks into another gear, and that's Ethan Hawke's character leaves the house as he says, I'm going to go find a newspaper, and it's it's just such a ridiculous statement even from the viewer, because at this point the internet has been out, and they, for example, watched a ship run aground, and there's just like been these things happening, and he's just like, oh, I'll just run to the gas station and get myself a newspaper and find out what's going on. It's
like Patrick Bateman's I have to return some videotapes.
Yes.
It's like, what?
Yeah. But everything ratchets up from that point. There there are different things going on. There, as he's driving, he encounters someone, and I don't know how much we want to even like give away there, but then meanwhile back at the house, everyone kind of has these little pieces of information that they have purposefully not shared with other members of this group. And I don't know if we even introduced kind of the conceit of it, is that the family, Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke's family, Clay and Amanda Stanford, they get this Airbnb, they rent it out and to do kind of an impromptu vacation, and they bring their children, and that night the owner of the home and his teenage daughter, or I don't know, young adult daughter. They show up at the door, and they're like, yeah, so we had some problems. We're wondering if you guys would mind if we stayed. Keep in mind it's their house, and so there's a lot of like back and forthing about that, and come to find out that everyone involved has some sliver of information that the rest of them don't really have. And of course, the Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke are trying to keep their kids mostly in the dark about this because they don't really know what's going on. And in the meanwhile, GH, played by Mahershala Ali, is trying to keep some things from his daughter, even though she knows a lot more than seemingly everybody else. She's kind of that person who's the most grounded, but also no one really believes her because she's just a young, she's just like some snotty teenager, or, I am assuming she's like 19 or 20.
That was my assumption too. Yeah.
I don't think they ever really say, but she's, I believe she's not in college is something we find out, although she's very smart. But there's like all these little like mini dynamics going on between them. And so there's a lot of dancing around with what people know, and they kind of like, for example, Clay and Amanda and the family watch this ship run aground at the beach, which they then don't tell GH and his daughter when they meet them, as they're saying, oh, there's like something going on. There's a blackout. And they're just like, oh yes, by the way, we watched this ship like hit the beach today, like in this very strange way that everyone was running from, and
it's,
so there's just a lot of these things going. There's kind of like class things going on as well, right? There's there's some jealousy and going on there, and Andy, as you touched on, Amanda's pretty like low key, as you said, low key racism. I mean, at one point she was just like, I'm just not used to, like she's almost like black, she's like, people I don't know.
Yeah.
You can almost see her like start to form the B with her lips before she speaks her mind. And it's just like, and she just like is going out of her way to be like, well, what if like he set this whole thing up so that he could rob us? And it's like, dude showed up in a tuxedo.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think like
a very elaborate robbery.
Right. She's like, they could be conning us. And it's like, listen, calm down, lady.
Right.
She's a pretty grade A Karen in this movie. And,
yes.
And she does it very well, I'll have to say.
Yeah. I just thought her dynamic with GH, Mahershala Ali's character, was really great, just because like you get the upfront kind of her instinctive hostility that's based in cultural bias or prejudice, and then just by kind of poking at her continually, he kind of cracks her facade until they're like sharing these moments together that are really fun and interesting. Meanwhile, Ethan Hawke is like on his own planet, either driving around or talking to the daughter and wondering about things he's done in his life and shit like that. So it's fun the way the movie kind of bounces between different character dynamics, and everybody kind of the characters are very like archetypal, like they're very easy to kind of break down into a few points, but the way those points bounce off each other, I think is really what makes the film fun. And there's just a lot of like, I would call it snappy dialogue, but that makes it sound like Tarantino or Sorkin or something. It's not like that. It's not like flashy dialogue, but it's very like all these opposing ideas kind of ping-ponging off each other the way they do in real life conversations when there's tension in the mix. And it's just a really nice portrayal of that, of how these people from kind of different perspectives who are strangers would actually interact with each other in an environment like this.
Absolutely. And I loved the way that like you guys kind of touched on the way that Mahershala Ali's character is able to kind of like crack through the facade of Julia Roberts's like racism and prejudice and everything and fear based in that. But also just like those ideas of withholding the information that each person has. Like, it's not a very prominent thing in most cases in the movie, but I love like that example of the ship kind of running aground. I just love how natural it is that like the casualness with which they decide to just not tell GH and his daughter about it. Like they touch on it, and like Ethan Hawke's like, well, I don't want to add more to the things. It's like, yeah, but that's important context for stuff that's happening, but
incredibly unusual too.
Exactly. And like it can veer off into that level of like kind of humor, into like in the sense of people reacting poorly or inadequately to very life-changing events. But it's also just a thing where they're in a very, very compromised state. They're in a situation that everyone involved is uncomfortable in for various reasons. And it's just like, it's like on the razor's edge of something that is working with them to an extent, but if they add more context, it's like this undercurrent of whether or not they should team together and like face it going forward, or if they should just like mistrust each other, which is all told like a major theme of the movie too. Yeah.
Well, and there's this sort of weird thing too. That line they're dancing on is between this, you know, what appears to be a very like societally changing event, and their unwillingness to really like commit any real attention to it. You know, and if you watch kind of the start of the film, there's this moment where Amanda comes to Clay and like gives him a pack of cigarettes, and he's like he's been caught, you know, and she's like, oh no, like she's like, I know you've been doing this, like just like go do it, don't let the kids see you smoke.
We're on vacation.
yeah and it's just like this weird little thing where she's like obviously been paying attention, where he thinks he's been fooling her by smoking occasionally. But then also, if you go, you know, a few minutes later, they're at the beach and the ship is hurtling toward the shore, like directly at them, and they can hardly be bothered to like even look at it. You know, the daughter is like, and they're like, what? It's like that thing when you have someone, you know, you got a friend or, you know, whoever, your significant other, and you're like, you got to see this thing, like hurry. And they're, you know, and
they can't
like,
look fast enough.
Yeah. And it's like, and they don't care to look fast at all. And they always invariably look just as it's too late to see.
And
it was like one of those moments. And that kind of happens a lot early in the film, where, you know, they're especially with the two of them, with you know, Amanda and Clay, they're just sort of not really all that engaged of outside of things that they're really directly interested in, and they're missing a whole lot because of that. And their children, that, you know, there was a moment where you know, the kids end up going off on their own, the two younger kids, and Amanda asks Ruth to not involve the kids in this. You know, she's like, hey, just like don't tell them anything, like keep them in the dark, let them just have their fun. And it's like these are you know, I don't know, Rose is like a preteen, she's what, like 11, and then Archie is like 15, I'm guessing. Like,
yeah, it seems like a high schooler.
Yeah, like they're old enough to at least know what's going on.
Yeah.
And she's you know, very like obviously purposefully keeping them in the dark. And then, you know, and then later on you see them and they are like, you know, they're like looking at all of these animals, like literally 100 animals are just like like deer, like not, you know, not squirrels, like deer are standing there staring at them, and they just don't know what to do. And you know, and then it occurred to me as I'm watching, I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, the reason they don't want to tell them is because they can't handle it. But then I go, well, no, the reason they can't handle it is because they don't tell them these things to begin with. And you know, and all of that just feeds into that kind of that mindset. There's like the helicopter parenting, and there's this kind of class battles going on, sort of kind of behind the scenes. Like there's just weird jealousy, and it's kind of like at these kids' age, they should be involved. They should know what's happening and know the stakes of what they're doing. You can't protect them from this kind of stuff. So all of that kind of just created this interesting little soup, and especially kind of in the first half of the movie.
Absolutely. And like that kind of adds additional texture to the ending of the movie, and like that it kind of blew the ending open for. Wait, that's not the right phrase. It kind of blew the ending wide open for me, because I think that we'll talk about that in spoilers, but
this ending is certainly is the kicker for the movie. And like we said, we're going to not mention it now. And don't, if you don't want it to be spoiled, don't listen obviously to us later, but it is a very big kicker, and this is all, and it all ties in with these themes.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that like for 2023 specifically, I don't know if there is anything to be said about the nature of this movie versus like the world we live in and everything, but I do think that for the year 2023, it's interesting that it's kind of been cinematically bookended with like Knock at the Cabin at the beginning of the year and now Leave the World Behind at the end. Two very kind of similar movies about families trying to survive a crazy scenario in isolation. I think that that's kind of an interesting pattern for the year.
Yeah.
And by pattern, I mean two movies.
Right. Well, certainly post-COVID, it's a thing, and it's something that a lot of our entertainment has kind of veered toward more recently. So, So I'm trying to think of the movie. Was it called Sick? There's a movie that
Sick.
Where there's like a girl being chased by a killer, and the woman won't let her in the car because she's like, you don't have your mask on, like kind of in the wake of all of that, these movies, I think that's, they always say that societal events affect the entertainment that comes after it. And we're kind of seeing that. I think with this movie, COVID is not obviously a thematic part of this movie, but I think those feelings, that feeling of paranoia and those feelings of
absolutely
isolating yourself from other people, these all come into play here. Yeah.
And I'm glad you said that COVID is not directly involved with it, because I was a little afraid you were going to say COVID is not real. And
you're being like,
comes out as an anti-vaxxer on a obsessive viewer.
Yes.
If I don't speak the truth, who will?
Oh, Jesus. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening to this episode. But no, are there any other things we want to talk about in non-spoilers, or should we shift over to, should we steer our ship toward the beach of spoiler territory?
I think there's only one other thing I kind of would like to touch on before spoilers is the way the film. Well, I likened it to 10 Cloverfield Lane earlier, which is a very tiny scope movie, very small scale, not a lot of like big spectacle, special effects, things like that. Obviously, there's the ending that kind of explodes, but other than that, very small. And this is very similar in tone and structure. But the interesting thing about it is this pressure cooker of a movie of just people interacting, but then it periodically kind of diverts into set piece territory where it's like, okay, we're at the Tesla car scene and the plane crash scene and the beach scene and the deer scene. And it's just like, I thought it was interesting watching this movie and it feeling like this very grounded in camera, dialogue driven movie that then kind of, as each character splits up or whatever, diverts into this kind of big grand VFX moment. And the CGI in this movie is not stellar. It's kind of what you'd expect of like a streaming product more than a Hollywood film, but I really didn't mind that because it felt like when this movie goes into those spectacle moments, the camera presents it in some really interesting way, like the scene of Mahershala Ali's character running back into the house as he's seeing the plane.
Oh yeah.
And it just kind of, the camera follows like into the house as if it's like a dollhouse that's split open. It's like goes in the side of the house and you see the whole wall and everything come blowing through it. Just choices like that where I'm like, okay, normally I think I'd be irritated that this very grounded movie is like taking all these big steps into giant digital set piece moment, but the cinematography or the staging of it keeps it feeling very organic with the rest of the film, because the camera is constantly moving and doing weird things and going through spaces in unusual ways and linking all these disparate moments together visually. And so I just thought that was cool how the film bounced between those two kind of modes.
Yeah,
totally agree. That definitely enhanced what would have been a more prominently lackluster, if I could say that, use of CGI, because like some of the stuff was a little bit dodgy there, but it definitely enhanced it.
If there's a criticism I really would have of this movie, is I think it would maybe revolve around not those shots that you're talking about, but those moments, some of those moments where, you know, you have all of these like weird animal things happening, and then you have, you know, weird failures with vehicles, like, you know, and we sort of get some answers, but it feels like it could feel like at a time, like especially looking back, and I've watched it twice now, and looking back at it, it's like it almost feels like some of them are red herrings in a sense, you know, where there's not a real payoff, or the payoff they give us, the at least the rationale they give us is kind of, especially with the animals, it's a little dodgy. And it's sort of like, why do we even include that other than it's just a really weird moment and it's just like really disconcerting. But yeah, you know, so that would kind of be the biggest criticism I could have of it. But some of them are, you know, kind of good and interesting ways that, you know, like you said, that they tie those moments together, and it's just kind of, I don't know. I think it's really done well, more than it's, you know, done as a detriment. It doesn't feel like it's piled on too much.
Yeah, and they're inserted almost as nice little like breaks from the constant bickering, because like I said, it's like usually one character going off by themselves, and then this fucking crazy shit happens to them, and you're like, what? And the funny thing too is, like, you know, especially like the Mahershala Ali beach scene with the plane, like, if I went off and experienced that would be like the only thing I could talk about for a month.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Comes back and it's like never brought up again. Almost.
He makes up some story about how he like tripped over something and fell into the pool.
Yeah,
you know, his daughter's like, "Why are you all wet?" And he's like, "Oh, I fell in the pool."
Imagine surviving an action movie level like event like that, and just sweeping it under the rug because you know, you don't trust the situation or whatever.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
Absolutely. Let's go into spoilers. So we can talk in more detail about these things. So we're going to go ahead and go into spoilers for Leave the World Behind. Before we do that, is this going to be on your guys' top 10 list at all, or in contention for it, or is it just going to be a fun 2023 movie you watched and
it's
what have you?
Probably somewhere around the like 20 to 25 mark for me. Nice. Which still I've thoroughly enjoyed at least, I don't know, 40 movies this year, so like it's still well within my happy place. But yeah, it's a good time.
It's actually, and I have a kind of a running list that it's sitting at 21 right now. So it's high enough. You know, I'm not going to go crazy about it, but I very much enjoyed it. It's a solid, strong movie.
Oh, nice. I guess it's at 20 for me.
There you go. I think it's sitting pretty with me around like 15 or 17. But yeah, I really enjoy it, and I'm eager to talk about it in spoilers. So yeah, that's my segue. Let's go into spoilers for Leave the World Behind. I'm going to play a clip from the trailer. If you want to navigate show notes, check the show notes to move away from spoilers. But after this clip from the trailer, we're going to be spoiling Leave the World Behind.
We were driving back to the city, then something happened.
You want to stay here, but we're staying here.
We need to get them out of here.
I need to think everything's gonna be okay.
Everything is going to be okay, isn't it?
We are seeing ongoing cyber attacks across the country.
Something is happening, and I don't trust them.
So spoilers on for Leave the World Behind, and let's get into it. What did you guys think in terms of spoilers, and what would be your sitcom that you would watch the finale of in a bunker?
Well, there's so much significance to Friends being the show that the girl was watching.
Yeah, like
number one, I believe Julia Roberts was in an episode or two of Friends.
Yeah, season 2, the Super Bowl episode. She was dating Matthew Perry in real life at that point. Yeah, I think they were engaged for a while too.
Wow.
Maybe,
yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so that was a fun little bit of like, meta-ness, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know what's the sitcom I would watch. I mean, The Office is always a kind of a favorite.
Yeah,
30 Rock is these are a little bit newer, but I don't know. There was something just so perfect about Friends being that choice, both because of Netflix and just because of the and the comment that Ruth made about how
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, what was the line? She said
it's something about how it's nostalgic for a time that never happened. Yeah, for a time that didn't exist or something like that.
Yeah, and it was that was so, and it is funny because and given kind of the more contemporary criticisms of Friends as a show, specifically like how white it was, and like those kind of. It kind of rang home given the kind of the subtle racial undertones of this movie, and the kind of the obliviousness of the family, of them, and what their kind of denial of the problems, or it was funny because it was with Julia Roberts, like she was very all over the place. Her character was all over the place because it was like, on one hand, she's panicking. She panics a lot. And she panics for a lot of things that she probably doesn't need to really panic about.
Right.
But then she gets mad at Ethan Hawke's character for not panicking, although, he very clearly could not because it would be complete chaos. So it just feels like, with that, and then of course the daughter's obsession with the show, and that being her, there's that moment where she is literally sitting on top of sleeping. And she's like, "Mom, I can't get the TV." Like it's such a like a kid thing to do.
Yeah.
And neither of you guys have kids, but that's a very kid thing to do. Like, Mom, I'm going to wake you up with the sounds and tell you that I can't watch this TV show. Like, could I be doing something else? Maybe, but I have to watch this show right now, or I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah.
And there's that whole thing where this is just like that singular focus, and that Rose has, and just that payoff was just so perfect.
Yeah. And kind of as an extension of the shielding aspect of it, like this, she's doing the same thing that her parents have done, basically in terms of keeping the kids from the knowledge of what's going on, or keeping them not, like quote unquote protected. She's just found this like sanctuary, and the first thing she does is grabs the DVD, and like I wrote in my letterbox blurb, just as a kind of joke, like, the final moment of this movie gave me such a deep, wow, this is literally me feeling, because that's literally probably the first priority. Like, in fact, throughout the movie,
pop in a comfortable movie or show at this time. Yeah.
Like throughout the movie, I kept thinking like, Oh man, well, if the internet's gone forever, like hopefully she finds DVDs or something. Like I had that thought during the movie. But I just thought that was a just fascinating statement to kind of bring home the themes of the family dynamics and everything. But what else?
well, I'd like to jump into that that dynamic. Another thing that we were talking about, kind of that duality of her kids are not prepared and couldn't handle the end of the world, so to speak, but also they can't because she continually specifically shielding them from things, which doesn't allow them to grow.
Yeah.
But there's also the aspect of that, and it hit me during that scene that I was just talking about, where Rose is sitting on top of Amanda while she's sleeping, and it's that it's also easier for her to keep the kids in the dark. If the kids aren't aware of this, she doesn't have to deal with them.
She doesn't have to answer their questions, and
And so there's that aspect of it being easier for them to just keep them ignorant of the situation. That way they don't have to actually parent them, which is kind of something that came out for, again, she was very judgmental. Amanda was about a lot of things. And then here she is, with this, just, it's pretty terrible. Honestly, it's a terrible way to parent. And it's, but it's something that a lot of people do. I mean, I know a lot of people who do these kinds of things and who have the same mindset, without getting too involved. People who are or have been very close to me in the past, who kind of who I've had discussions with about these kinds of things. So it's something that a lot of people do, and certainly contributes to like the tension of this, because those kids are out in the woods wandering around, not knowing. They just, as far as they know, everything is fine. So anyway, that was kind of the big thing I took away from that those whole relationships, were, and especially, like I said, tying it in with that kind of sublimely fun ending.
Yeah, and it's funny because like the sheltered aspect of it, or the kids being ill-equipped to deal with like anything going on, is also kind of reflected in the way that Archie reacts to what's GH's daughter's name? Ruth. With him like taking the candid shots of her and then jerking off to her later, and then like I love how that's reflected in like the way that Ruth is like talking to her dad. It's like, I think the dad wants to fuck me, and the son was taking pictures of me and stuff, and it's just like it's such an interesting contrast to see these like maladjusted kids versus her, who's very perceptive and aware of things a lot better. And I don't know if that plays into into some of the class kind of dynamics as well, but I just thought that was a really interesting dichotomy to strike like between the two family groups in the movie.
I thought that was a really great way to adjust it. Because Archie is very clear. Like they have that moment where he sees her for the first time in the bathing suit, and it's just like, oh my god, and it could have gone any number of ways. It could have turned into like a romance, where he was like talking to her, but instead he chose to be a creeper and take video of her, take pictures of her, and it's certainly a kind of a testament to her and to the parenting that raised her. That she was aware of that and called that out to her dad, and that there is that comfortability between them, because she said that to him. I mean, she was very frank, and she the way you worded it, where she's like, oh yeah, like like Clay would definitely fuck me. Like she didn't beat around the bush at all. She wasn't like, Daddy, I feel uncomfortable. Right. She was like, he wants to fuck me. Yeah. And it was just like, whoa. I mean, I've got a 16-year-old daughter. Like if she said something like that to me, I'd be very alarmed by that. And he was very calm and cool about it, which again was his character. But there's a lot that goes into these things of how these parents raise their children differently, and how how perceptive they are to what's going on around them.
Yes. So the set pieces, so throughout the movie, I was kind of, I didn't, this is weird. It's kind of weird because like, I'm just kind of like, I didn't know at the start, like what kind of movie it was. Like, I didn't know if this was a movie that it wanted. Yeah. I didn't know if it wanted me to try to deduce what's going on, or if it wanted me to, just follow along. But when the beach plane crash sequence happens, the way that plays out is just wonderful. And I don't know if this is intentionally the case, but for a brief moment I was thinking like, could this be something as direct as like whatever's going on is like manifesting like the deepest fears of the character? So like Mahershala Ali's character, his wife is on a plane somewhere when the shit goes down. So like he is at a plane wreckage and another plane is crashing. But it's like that wasn't the case in terms of like what the situation was and everything. But I just thought that I don't know. I thought that was really, really terrifying. And again, kind of similar to something in Knock at the Cabin as well. But yeah, I really like the set pieces.
Yeah, and I agree. And man, all this we've talked about, we haven't even mentioned Kevin Bacon's involvement either. Because that's just such a different. It's a whole other little tangent that, but again, kind of thematically ties into all of it. That this where this guy that GH Mahershala Ali's character had been friends with. And he's like, oh yeah, let's like go to his house. Like he'll know what to do. And he shows up and he's like, no, you got to get out of here. Like I'm not doing anything to help you. And he's like, into the world, buddy. It's just like, it's like every man for himself. And he, like he even like racks his shotgun and he's like, and it turns into like this weird standoff between the two of them. And it's just like it's all just and Kevin Bacon also is kind of embodying a. I don't know how to say it. He's sort of the self-made man. Like he's very clearly a working man. Yeah. He's not as he calls other people a rich asshole, that is, has landed some cush job or has a rich family. And so, like this, he very much like he wears a cap, a baseball cap, and he's got a scruffy beard. And he's, like he's very clearly meant to be sort of a man who's made himself, he's had a hard working life as opposed to, people who have these cush jobs. And that is important to him, obviously. And he's, and he makes the kind of the comments later on, like, hey, you should go to whoever's the bunker, cause they, like they did this whole thing on the down low where they just built this doomsday shelter for themselves. And, it's like I knew it. That's what he's doing. So like go to his house. He's not there because like it's just like that that whole thing where it's just but also it doesn't. It also at the same time doesn't like celebrate him as Richard Dreyfuss maybe said, like this working man's hero crap. To borrow a line from Jaws. It's not like they're saying that these so-called uneducated people are the people who are smart enough to survive, although like, he clearly is someone who doesn't have the same quote unquote pedigree as the rest of them, but and you kind of get the feeling he's going to last longer than any of them will. But it's just where it's just like in the end your money can't really help you if you're not prepared. I think that's more the message, I think, than it is like, oh, all these rich pricks are going to get killed, because they certainly will, but there's plenty of inner city schlubs who were dying as well. Things happening.
Well, and the interesting thing too about Bacon's character is like you said, it's not painting him as like the hero or whatever, but it's actually even kind of an indictment of like that kind of, because we all know somebody or we're Facebook friends with somebody or whatever who like kind of leans toward those sort of nut job tendencies of like, oh, when everything goes to shit, I'll have my guns and I'll have my farm or whatever, and like none of you, I'll shoot any of you on site if you step on my property, blah blah blah. You know, these very kind of, a lot of times they're, you know, Second Amendment people or you know, kind of often Republican or libertarian, and I think it's an interesting portrayal of how that person will end up in the apocalypse. You know, yes, they will be better prepared, they will survive, but you know what? These people that like also claim to be, you know, the common man, the like the salt of the earth, they will not have any empathy. Like they don't care about you now, and they won't care about you then. Yeah. And it's kind of like the kind of, I guess it's maybe just like a kind of a bleak examination of like the people who will be, you know, the most prepared are the least likely to give you a helping hand.
Absolutely.
Both on the upper class end and on the middle or working class end. So that was kind of an interesting, it was such a small part, like, you know, small scene in the movie right toward the end, and I didn't expect it to be basically the last scene before the friends scene at the end,
before the punchline, basically.
I just thought that was really cool because I didn't even know Kevin Bacon was in it. And I was like, oh, all right.
I forgotten. I saw his name was in the opening credits, and I saw it, and then I just forgot. And then at the end, he pops up, and I'm like, and I didn't even recognize him for a second when I first saw him. I was not paying that much attention. I was like, oh, like, who's this guy? And then I looked and I was like, damn, that's Kevin Bacon. I was like, that's right, he is in this movie. And so it was just sort of a weird surprise, even though, like I said, I even noted his name. I was like, oh, Kevin Bacon's in this. Cool. Okay. Yeah. And then he shows up, and it's again him playing a bit against type, you know. Yeah. And that's just, it's interesting how, you know, Julia Roberts also is it's a little against type for her to be a character like that. And I mean, I don't know, Ethan Hawke is pretty varied, but it's maybe a little bit, you know, off center for him. Some of the like the cowardly aspects of the character that kind of emerge, but it's just really a lot of fun to kind of sit through this movie and see all the things and you know, and kind of play that guessing game as to what's going, because there's a lot of speculation as to what it could be, and you know, they even talk about, like, you know, it's a civil war thing, like it's these external forces causing a civil war, and it was like, oh wow, like, where does that come from? Like, but then, you know, people are like, this is the strategy, like you know, and basically like things that the U.S. has been doing it, and this is what's funny is, like, at a larger level, like a socio-political level, it's something that the United States has been doing, is being involved in other people's, you know, affairs and kind of driving wedges between people and causing them
destabilizing countries.
Exactly. Like, it certainly is a thing that a strategy we've employed, and now suddenly it's just turned against us. But at the same time, the movie doesn't take that stance directly. You know, it's not like, you shitty Americans deserve this. It's, right. And it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for that to be a major theme, but it's still there, but it's a little more subtle, and you have to kind of think about it to get there.
Yeah. And I like the kind of microcosm aspect of it, to where, like, like you said, it's the same thing that we've done to other countries, and maybe it's happening to us. But, like, even when the movie is filled with so much speculation, so many different theories and things that could happen, just, I like that the most arguably definitive thing is that, like, Kevin Bacon saying that, like, you know, maybe a few of our enemies join together and are taking us down. And then Mahershala Ali's character is just like, okay, well, like, that moment in the car when they're leaving after getting the medicine and everything, he's just like, I need to know that you're with me, and, like, we're together on this, because this is what's going on. This is what I believe is happening. We need to make sure that we're together. And it's just, I don't know. I think that that's an interesting way to kind of close the story of what's going on, while leaving everything so open-ended and open to interpretation. I think that's a really good way to kind of skirt the line of an ambiguous ending while giving us enough detail, enough answers, enough information for us to kind of still be satisfied by it.
Yeah. And that it was funny. You know, kind of going back to that, you know who it was, you know who it is. It's the Koreans, you know, or maybe the Chinese, you know, and then it's like, oh, well, that's funny. Well, we have this thing. And, you know, it's like, we think it's the Iranians, you know, because they have the, you know, the flyer from the crop duster, or the drone is what they called it.
Yeah.
But that it is kind of like, that is that theme where, you know, we are very divided along these lines, these like hard lines, kind of societally right now. And it's easy. That's sort of an easy thing to pick on, but a very valid thing to pick on, you know, for a film like this to talk about that, you know, that the wedge that someone else can drive between us. And it's sort of a kind of a prescient little bit of a point, you know, to make.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a takeaway for, you know, for the person watching the movie is, you know, is maybe we could stop, you know, seeing these exterior differences in, you know, in a more of a come together sort of way, other than, you know, distrusting someone because, you know, this rich uppity black person, you know, like that first thing with Julia Roberts, man, where she was like, she just looks at him, she's like, "You own this house?"
Yeah.
I was like,
oh
damn.
God, yeah.
I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
And then finally Ruth comes out and says it and makes her kind of face it, and she's like, why is that?
I loved how direct she was with that. Like how she just cut, like Ruth just cut through the bullshit there. It's like, that's the pot calling the kettle black. You know, like, the way she enunciated black, I was like, yeah, so good, so good.
And Julia Roberts is very much just like clutching her pearls, like, oh my God. Also, you're right.
Yep. She's like the I don't know, the feeling I was like, she's like the dad in Get Out, like, I would have voted for Obama a third time.
Yeah.
Right. I can't be racist.
Yeah.
She's like, listen, I let you guys in. I can't be racist. You know, like, I mean, she never says that, but
right. Jeez.
And Ethan Hawke's character is just so like, I don't know, just so nonchalant about the whole thing. You know?
It's so
mostly just an annoyance for him, you know.
Right.
It's like, how about, honey, don't be so damn racist for these people, you know, instead of just like, how do you know that they're, you know, like, how do you know they're trying to scam you? You know, like, he had the keys, like, he told you his name, like, you have been emailing this guy and know his name. Like, it's like, well, he could have like hacked into someone's email and then he could have stolen those keys and then, you know, like, maybe he murdered someone and adopted their identity so they could rob us, you know. It's just like, you know, it's like this complete ridiculousness that kind of comes out in a kind of a moment of panic. So
absolutely. Yeah. Any other thoughts and spoilers, or should we wrap up this review, guys?
You know, there was kind of one thing I would be remiss if I didn't ask you guys about it, because Nick Rogers of Midwest Film Journal and I had a whole conversation about this. The sound design, or one particular element of the sound design, that winds up being, I think, clearly kind of a building you into something, but at first sounds like there's something wrong with your sound system. I think it first shows up in when the oil tanker beaches, as it's like crashing into the sand or whatever. I was hearing these little just like pops. Like, obviously there's like the loud bassy churning of the boat hitting the coast, but then amidst that there was this little like, and I was like, what is going on? I was like looking at my little speakers, and I was like, I got concerned, and Nick had the same reaction. I was like, is my sound system going to shit right now? Like, come on. And then like
Nick would have a panic about something like that.
Oh
too.
yeah.
Well, and then kind of every time there's like a major, another one of those incidents that really kind of brings the sound to a peak. Those pops and clicks get a little bit louder until there's that one. I think it's right at the end of the like, noise weapon or whatever that they use. Right at the end of that, it's punctuated with a really loud pop, like somebody just popped their bubble gum in your ear. And at that point, it's all kind of like full circle, like, oh, okay, the movie was like cueing me into this off kilter vibe that it was bringing. And also kind of like, it's kind of blurring the line between like diegetic and not non-diegetic sound, because I don't think those pops were meant to be like in the scene on the beach. Universe. Like I don't think the ship was creating those sounds. I think it was just the movie kind of setting you up to be really confused about, what was happening to these people. And then when those sounds kind of start to come in, and then they become a diegetic sound at the end with that like loud punctual pop. That's really interesting.
That's so interesting, because I did not pick up on the popping like at all. I thought you were I thought you were referring to just the sound weapon thing.
Well, and
that's interesting.
Interesting thing about that too is I think Nick, who I don't know what his sound setup is or how different it is from mine, but he did not hear the popping early in the movie. He only heard it like during the noise weapon sequence.
Okay.
And so when I asked him I was like watching the movie, and I was like, okay, so you're talking about, because he had already told me about the sound issue he was having. And I was like, oh, okay, so you're talking about the scene where the boat hits the beach. And he's like, no, what? What are you talking about? I was like, it's happening.
There is just a lot. There's just a concerted effort through this movie to do very subtle things to just throw you off and just give you, just to like shift you away. Those even just like, that's, I mean, I guess that's sort of like the more of a musical cue, like, to your point, than it is something you're experiencing, like the characters are experiencing in the film. They don't hear that noise. We do. And there's, and we mentioned the camera work earlier, and there's just a lot of little subtle things that they do in this film to make you uncomfortable as a viewer. And it's worked to great effect. It's, that subtlety really kind of goes a long way.
Absolutely. Yep. So I ended up rating it 4 stars. What did you guys rate it?
Same.
Yeah, same. 4 stars. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, any other thoughts on Leave the World Behind, or should we leave this review behind?
Let's go on.
All right. Well, that is our review of Leave the World Behind. Once again, it is available on Netflix, but if you're listening this far in, you've already been spoiled on it. So yeah. Next up, we're going to do a secondary review of Silent Night. Joe, you have not seen this, or are you going to hop off?
I have not seen this. I haven't decided.
Okay.
I'm going to hop off or not. I think I will. Yeah, I think I will. I probably don't have much to add. I could talk about the John Woo movies I've seen as John Woo, right? Which is still sort of limited, but but yeah, I think I can close out. And I'll catch up with this film at another time and can offer my thoughts elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell people where they can find you online and what you've got kind of in the works for your film journalism.
Yeah. So we talked about Midwest Film Journal. I've been doing quite a bit, especially more recently with them. We mentioned the Samuel L. Jackson pieces are mostly what I have out. I'll have a review of the Iron Claw coming up pretty soon, and you touched upon at the start. I'll be going on film sociology. I'm not sure when that will be available. I'm going to record it the morning after tomorrow. So not tomorrow, but the next day as we're recording this. Not that this matters to a listener.
You'll be recording it while this episode is being released on the internet.
Okay. So if you're listening to this just after it drops, then I will at that moment probably be working on recording my episode of Film Sociology, which is on WFYI. It's I believe if you go, I don't know, it's a podcast now. So I think if you go to WFYI.org, you can find it. And Matt Sosi has been there forever and ever. And I've been on his show many times as a guest host and just as a guest. So it's very good. I would say comparable to this program as well in terms of astute analysis.
In terms of weirdos being on it,
and certainly weirdos being there.
You mean this program, Obsessive Viewer? Well, thank you.
I'm making comparison. I'm making a favorable comparison. So,
well, thank you.
This is as high a praise I think as I can offer anything that I'm personally have been involved with. So, so go check that out. And also Midwest Film Journal, of course. I'll keep hammering that. We already mentioned Letterboxd. That's Joe R. Shearer there. It's SHEARER. And I don't know, find me on Facebook. I'm technically on Twitter and Instagram, but you'll never find me there. LinkedIn, I don't know, like
LinkedIn
depends on how involved we want to get here. But that's about it for now.
Joe trying to get the connections made.
Right. we mentioned Medium Cool, a movie podcast, which has kind of been on a hiatus for a while, and maybe we'll be coming back at some point. But you can, if you are into podcasts and want to check that out, by all means, go look at some of our past episodes, and maybe we'll have something new in the relatively near future if things work out. Nice. If not, just tell Matt to keep bugging me if you want to talk about movies and stuff.
Absolutely. Well, it's always a pleasure to have you on, and thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon. And I'm very eager to read your review of Iron Claw and to listen to your episode with Sosi on it, because I know you have some a lot of big feelings about that movie, and I'm very
we could just jump into that
eager.
Now. All right. Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.
They tell me I view obsessively.
All right, so now we're going to go on to our secondary review of the night, which will likely be a non-spoiler review because I don't know how to spoil this movie, honestly.
Not a lot of surprises.
No. The movie is Silent Night. I'm going to play a clip from the trailer to bring us into that review. So here we go, a clip from the trailer for Silent Night, which is currently in theaters. All right, so we're going to review Silent Night, but I just found out that Andre Brauner died.
Oh.
Yeah, from Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Homicide: Life on the Streets. That's very sad.
Yeah.
Huh.
Jeez.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know how to transition to the review.
Our condolences to his loved ones. That's awful.
Yeah, I loved him in. Oh my God, I loved him in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and of course The Mist. He's phenomenal in that. Damn. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, let's go into our review. Silent Night, currently in theaters. It was released in theaters on December 1st. The plot summary, courtesy of IMDb, is a grieving father enacts his long-awaited revenge against a ruthless gang on Christmas Eve. Director for the movie was John Woo. Writer was Robert Archer Lynn. And the cast includes Joel Kinnaman, Catalina Sandina Marino, and Kid Cudi. And this movie is unique because it is a John Woo action movie, American John Woo action movie. And there is like no dialogue because the kind of conceit of it is that Joel Kinnaman's character is shot in the throat and cannot speak, so he does not speak throughout the movie. And yeah, I didn't like the movie that much. Yeah, Andy, how did you feel about it? And what's your history with John Woo? Because I kind of feel like you're probably more well-versed in the Woo-verse than I am.
Maybe a little bit, probably not a lot of it. I think Joe said at the end of the last segment that he's, fairly inexperienced, and I would kind of consider myself the same. I think I've seen maybe 2 or 3 of his his Hong Kong action films, and then I want to say 3 or 4 of his American action films. And I think generally the consensus is that American Woo not quite as great as Hong Kong Woo. Yeah. Although, his American movies also have their defenders. A lot of people call like Mission Impossible 2 the most underrated of that series. And I personally love Face Off. Yeah,
Face Off is great.
But I wouldn't say I'm somebody who's like, gone to class on John Woo. But yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with his reputation and his storied career and all the just contributions he's made to the genre and the influence that he bears. So I definitely went into this pretty excited. I don't think I've ever seen a John Woo movie in theaters. So I was kind of like, okay, this will be cool. I like Kinnaman. I think he's kind of an underrated actor. It seems like he often finds himself in less than stellar movies. But I always think he's like, there's like a nugget of something great going on in whatever he's doing, even if the movie is like not very good. I loved him in The Suicide Squad, which is actually a pretty good movie. Yeah, so to see him get to do this kind of high concept little action vehicle thing with a real prominent gimmick, I was like, this could be really cool. But I gotta say, I don't think the gimmick worked at all, and I don't think it made up for it with cool action.
It's so funny because on one hand, I honestly wasn't really fully aware of the gimmick until maybe like the day I went to the theater. Like, it wasn't one of those things where like, oh, I found out like in progress of it, but like I'd heard here and there like a day or two before I actually saw the movie. And it's tricky for me to review this because I watched John Wick Chapter 4 the other day, and like,
what a great primer!
Yes, like this movie, the action in this movie is, I would say pretty solid. There's some really fun, just bombastic set pieces, vehicular stuff, and just like some really cool like set pieces and choreography, and like the violence is cool, is interesting, is what I said in my Letterboxd review was that if I got the distinct feeling that if I was more well versed in Woo, I would have probably not been so impressed with the action, because it at times felt like he was just kind of playing the hits. Like nothing in it seemed innovative for his for his personal style or anything. I've seen like Broken Arrow and Face Off and Mission Impossible 2, but it's been years since I've seen those movies. But it just felt very wooey, and I feel like what the movie tried to do was take an interesting gimmick and infuse it with the kind of what I would presume is a pretty generalized John Woo style. But the problem is that the gimmick wasn't sustainable enough. Like you said, it wore thin very, very quickly. And it just got kind of it felt like at parts that it was just trying a little bit too hard to work around the gimmick of no dialogue. And it just felt like unneeded, like very much unneeded.
And like it was constantly straining against its own gimmick. I'm all for if a movie wants to like really limit itself with this very specific approach. And I honestly think the concept of a quote unquote silent action film is really cool. You know, using action, I don't necessarily mean fighting or violence, but action, movement, acting, to drive your story in absence of words is a really neat idea. But this movie really feels like a movie that wanted to have dialogue, but decided that it wouldn't, or decided that it couldn't. So it just has a bunch of texting in it. And the texting is just so like, I mean, it's not like the movie is constantly throwing, you know, texting at you, but the first half of the film is before he really gets, you know, on his murder mission, and he's dealing with his wife and all that sort of thing. And so it's like they're constantly having to converse through text, even though she's standing there right in the room with him. And it's like, okay, the guy can't talk, but he can still like hear you and gesture to you and things like that. And it's just like, the movie makes no effort to like conceal or make its gimmick organic. It's just like, it feels like somebody said at the start, this has got to be a no dialogue movie, and then just like had to scrape together a plot for an action movie with no dialogue.
Absolutely.
So it did not work for me.
No, me neither. And it reminded me, in terms of the gimmick, it reminded me of another movie that came out this year, No One Will Save You. It was on Hulu.
Oh yeah.
We reviewed it in episode 398 of the podcast, but that is a movie that it had a concept where also it was no dialogue. The concept was no one spoke in it.
That's like an alien invasion movie, or like an abduction movie.
Kind of a home invasion, alien invasion thing. It's very heavily inspired by a specific Twilight Zone episode. But even then, like when you have it, like there are ways to make that gimmick work well if it is organic to the story. And like in both cases of No One Will Save You and Silent Night, it just feels like you said, like it's straining it. It's straining the concept and doesn't really it hinders any chance of characterization. In particular, like they sidestep it well enough with his wife and their relationship and everything, but then you have like Kid Cudi is in the movie, and like it's kind of a bump. Like he's like literally just by default he's given nothing, like nothing at all. And I don't think there's enough strength in the material for him to put any like emotion in the body language of the performance.
No,
for it to detect anything.
Yeah, I don't. It's a film that's short not only on text but also subtext.
Yes,
and so I can just imagine the nightmare that it would have been for any of the actors besides maybe Kinnaman to try and mine the script for any sort of material to play with. Honestly, I think Cudi comes across as just a doofus in that, just a total square in this. And I don't know that that's his fault. No, it's just like he's also dressed like Jake from State Farm, like he's wearing like these tight khakis and like a puffy vest or like a sweater or a track jacket or something and a button-up shirt, and it's like, why are you in business casual? Like, I get that he's like a cop or a detective or something, but like he looks like a nerd.
Absolutely.
And he's not supposed to be a nerd. He's supposed to be like the guy who comes and saves the day or whatever. I mean, again, like if I were to, you know, throw this movie a bone, I would say that Kinnaman embodies this character well. You know, it's a very physical role, and he emotes very physically in the film. His character is one that's dealing constantly in extreme emotions, and so he's dialed up to 10 the whole time. I just don't think that the script or even Wu's direction really gives him enough to chew on. So he's kind of just an angry asshole the whole time. But you know, it's like John Wick is an angry asshole,
right?
But he's compelling because the film takes the necessary time and puts the emphasis on the necessary moments to get you on board with whatever's going on with him. And also he's surrounded by likable characters who like him. And in this, Kinnaman's not likable and nobody he knows is likable. And well, the only person who's sympathetic in the film is his wife. And she's gone. She's gone. A third of the way into the movie because he's an asshole. Surprise, surprise.
Oh yeah. It's just it just didn't work for me. And like I kind of talked about earlier, like the action worked pretty well for me. Like bad John Woo is still decent John Woo from my limited experience with his work. It's just there was just I don't know. It was kind of a nothing burger for me. And you're a more generous man than I in terms of the action here. I was not. I think maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I would have looked at and I don't mean my age, 10 or 15 years ago, because I was like a child. But if I were me now in 2010, 2008 or something, and I saw this movie and it was exactly like it is now, I would be a lot more impressed with the action. It is very scrappy and kinetic. Like the camera is moving the whole time, kind of keeping you going with the momentum of the fight. It just feels to me like a very I think in my like Letterboxd review I called it like post-Wick era piddling, where it feels like there are a lot of movies that have come out since the first John Wick that are kind of, they're not necessarily doing John Wick, but they're kind of, they're aping a lot of similar visual styles that like Chad Stahelski kind of, I don't know if he pioneered, but popularized with those movies, and kind of merging ranged and close quarters combat with like the sort of gun fu thing. And there's just been a lot of that for the last decade, often shot in like really mundane, gritty urban interiors. A lot of like hallway fights and stairway fights have become very popular. And I like the Daredevil Netflix show as much as the next guy, but like we kind of did that. And like, unless you're an old boy or that first hallway scene in Daredevil, like maybe find a new trick. And it feels like this movie is kind of constantly employing tricks I've seen like half a dozen times in the last decade. And it isn't doing them even as memorably as those other movies doing it. So I found myself not being very forgiving, even though it was like, yes, this is technically complex. And like, I can look at it and see it's cool that they did that. I wish I hadn't seen a dozen other movies do that exact same thing better before watching this movie. And I think maybe just it coming from John Woo also kind of soured that for me. If this had been a first-time filmmaker or something, like a first Hollywood, somebody getting their first Hollywood shot, and they're like, okay, let's do this scrappy, wild, stupid, crazy action movie. I'd have been like, you know what, kid? Keep trying. Like, there's a solid start. Keep going, you'll get it. But just for it to be Woo, who's got 20 or 30 years of action under his belt, and different kinds of action too, because like again, American Woo is this very like bombastic, showy, slow motion, melodramatic action. Classic Woo is a little bit more scrappy and creative and close quarters and that sort of thing. And this just kind of felt like it was not hitting any of the Woo that I know or the Woo that I look for, and was just kind of falling back on very modern, already getting stale action conventions. That is totally fair. And I actually agree with you pretty much across the board. What I think my thing was with getting attached to the action was that it takes so long. It is excruciating the build up toward the action. Like,
yeah,
it's
something of a relief.
Yes,
when the action starts happening, like I'll definitely give you that.
Yeah, like this was once the action happens, I was just like, I was thankful, I was excited. Like I was like, this is John Woo's Christmas present to me because I had to suffer through like all of this, but like, and I kept toying with like, whoa, what am I gonna like? What maybe I'll say something snarky on Letterboxd, like, oh, it's really important to have goals and set goals for yourself, because the entire movie is him just like it's procedure, it's process of him building up toward that, and it's like, okay, but also when you don't have when the conceit of the movie is to not have any dialogue, like you lose most, if not all, of the of the procedure of it, of learning the stuff, and you're seeing him learning and seeing him grow and seeing him put his plan into effect. But it just feels it takes the form of a montage, an hour and 15-minute long montage.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. Although I will say, like, if it almost might have been more effective, or the silent or no dialogue aspect of it would have been less grating if it had maybe taken a more stylistic approach to narrative structure, almost more like a montage. Like if, like, take, I don't know, what's a good, maybe the opening sequence in Up. You know, there's no dialogue in that sequence. Totally different goal there. You know, that's an emotional, type sort of thing. But like, you take that and it's like nobody, they don't say a word to each other the whole time. They're not even like really writing notes to each other. It's just like, you're just getting these little kind of almost like you're a fly on the wall, little vignettes of their life. And like, I think if this had done more of that, where it's like, instead of putting us in a situation with these characters where they need to say things to each other, show me glimpses of the life before in a kind of choppy enough, scrapbooky enough way that there would be no need for dialogue, even if this was a no dialogue movie. You could just cut right through it instead of making me sit for an hour through scenes that are texted, or scenes that are two people staring at each other and waving their hands. Right. You know, it's like, you could have just shown me like the drive-by, and then him weeping in the yard, and then in the hospital or whatever, and then a brief moment of them screaming at each other or getting in a fight, and then she leaving, and then it's like, we didn't need to treat it like a normal movie. No. If you're not making a normal movie, don't shoot it and edit it like a normal movie.
Exactly. And so make it like, animated, because it worked for Pixar too.
Imagine if this bloodbath was animated in the style of Up.
It would be something unique and interesting. But then also, kind of to that point, the weird structure at the beginning, like the way it starts in the middle of the action. Yeah. And then it's so long, like we know from like the trailer and from context clues, like, oh yeah, his son died, and that's what kicked off everything. But like, it's not until like I don't know how long, but considerably into the movie where we see the flashback of that. Like, tell it in a linear fashion so that we can like latch on to the emotion. Don't make it a mystery for the audience. Yeah. When you already have a gimmick that is restricting the way that information is told.
Right. Well, and understand that like we are not here to find out how this happened to him. Yeah. We are here to see a no dialogue action film.
Right. Exactly.
So like, don't, piss around forever milking this sort of like, how did we get here type of situation. And it also takes the kind of impact out of your premise, because when in that opening, I think, is it in the opening scene that we see how he lost his voice?
Yeah, that's the way that the kind of opening ends. Yeah.
Opens right with that. Cool. You want to do the drop us in the middle. What is that? En media res or whatever.
En media res, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say that, but I didn't want to seem snooty.
Like, do that. That's great. But then they cut back to before that, and it's like if the gimmick of your movie is no dialogue, don't show me that gimmick and then take me back to before that gimmick.
Yeah.
But maintain the gimmick. Like, you know, it takes us back to before he lost his voice, and yet there's still no dialogue before he lost his voice. It's like there should be some kind of contrast there.
Yeah. Like,
if you're gonna start before he loses his voice, have the first 5 minutes of the movie have dialogue. Right. And then he loses his voice and the rest of the movie's silent.
Absolutely.
Like, you know. Absolutely.
And like that kind of makes more sense as to why they did it that way, because it is kind of like a memory or flashback, and like the opening scene is establishing that he loses his voice, but it's still like it's so unneeded. Like just like it, I don't know. It's at the expense of storytelling and a very flimsy story.
I have to imagine he was. Yeah, that was in the making of it. That probably felt like the meat of the film. And it was like, we have to have this in order for people to care. Yeah. I just think the meat should have been cooked differently.
I agree. Yep.
And really at the end of the day, it's like, you know, a movie like this, really the meat is the action. Like that's why we're showing up. John Woo's name is on it. People are going to die, like lots of blood. That's why I'm here. Yeah. So
doves flying all over the place.
Yeah. Give me whatever premise you need to get the action rolling, but then like, come on, let's do the damn thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Not a lot positive to say about Silent Night.
Nope. I agree. Yeah, we can kind of close down the review then. I don't have anything else to say. It'll be interesting in like a year or two when I'm looking through the podcast and remember that this movie exists.
This is one that probably, after this season, I will kind of, it'll fade into that vague spot where it's like somebody mentions it and then I'm like, oh, that I saw that, didn't I?
Yeah. You mean the David Harbour Santa Home Alone movie? No, that's Violent Night. Oh, geez. Yeah. Well, that should do it for our review of Silent Night. I rated it 2 stars. What did you rate it again, Andy?
1.5.
1.5. Okay.
Pretty close.
Yeah. And since we went so long with the nominee stuff, I'm not going to bother with a potpourri section, but I do want to thank you for joining me tonight,
Thanks
Andy.
for having me.
Yeah, of course. And
doubly so.
Thank you. And if you wouldn't mind telling people where they can find you, where they can, pitch your podcast to the podcast listeners here who should already be listening to your show in addition to this. But tell us where we can find you and what you're working on.
Yeah, so the podcast is Odd Trilogies, which I host with my good friend Logan Sowash. You can find us at, our primary website is oddtrilogies.castos.com. You can also find the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, all that. And we're also on Facebook and Twitter as Odd Trilogies. And then I write for the Film Yap, which is filmyap.substack.com, kind of an Indianapolis-based review site. And I am also on Letterboxd, as you mentioned, letterboxd.com/Dandible. And that's probably where I kind of have my most that Letterboxd is my Twitter. I have a personal Twitter, but I've kind of phased it out of my social media circuit.
Smart.
I'm thinking about Threads, but I'm also like, maybe I just don't need something like that in my life. So Letterboxd is kind of where I post my, hot takes or goofy blurbs or whatever, because I'm not tweeting with the kids these days. So.
Yeah. With Threads, I'm on Threads, and I kind of feel like I'm not actively on Threads all that much, but I kind of feel like Threads is cool if you want Twitter with 5 people. Because it kind of seems like it's just not that active. And granted, I'm not an active participant, so
like a Twitter group chat.
Pretty much. Yep. Well, once again, thank you for joining me, and I love what you're doing at Odd Trilogies. I don't remember if I told you this or not, but I listened to your guys' VHS episode, and
it was our Halloween episode.
Yes, and you guys had mentioned like toward the end, there was a bit of a bit of discussion between you two where as to whether you should do the other three, the kind of revamped ones. Yeah. I would say definitely do. There's some good stuff. Like obviously it's going to be better than VHS Viral, obviously, but there's some really good stuff in those three, and they're coming out with a new one, and I just love that it's just kind of a yearly anthology. Franchise.
That's good
now.
to know. Thank you for that recommendation, because I mean, I love anthology stuff, at least in concept. Grew up on Twilight Zone, and Black Mirror is really fun, and I just love all that kinds of little short form storytelling kind of strung together under a unifying theme. So I would love a VHS movie that's actually good. So we did talk about it, and I think probably at some point we will do the more recent ones, although maybe by the time we do that they'll have 4 or 5 more of them. So who knows?
Well, regardless, I look forward to everything you do anyway. So so excited to chat with you and stuff. And Joe, if you're listening to this section, Joe, thank you for joining us earlier.
You're a peach, Joe.
Yes. So I'm going to let you go. Speaking of anthology stuff, check out my other podcast, Anthology, which is me covering the Twilight Zone, Black Mirror, all of those other kinds of shows. Also check out Tower Junkies, which is me and Tiny just sharing our love of Stephen King. And of course, like I said at the top of the show, check us out on YouTube. Subscribe to us on YouTube. So if you just want one place to get all 3 podcasts, check us out on YouTube. Subscribe. I'm going to start playing us out. And also check out the Patreon, because money. Patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Tons and tons of content. I have a blast doing it, and it's just like, for context, I think I've released like 35 episodes of podcasts this year, and I will end the year with about 150 some Patreon exclusive recordings. So keep that in mind. Yeah. And thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you next week. And now enjoy this short clip from our Patreon exclusive RSS feed. For the full clip and more exclusive Patreon content, such as early access to episodes, TV, book, and movie reviews and reaction recordings, commentary tracks, and Patreon potpourri episodes, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and become a patron at the minimum rate of $1 per month. Thank you and enjoy. Maybe the intention is that, yes, maybe the reason why we don't see the family working through these issues and working through these incidents and this tragedy that happens to them at several different turns. Maybe the reason we're not seeing that is because of Fritz and the way that he raised the kids and the way that he basically is emotionally distant, and he just wants to drill into them the importance of like wrestling and like that is the most important part of his life, not like the mental health or the physical health or actual parenting to the kids. I think there's a read of that where that is the intention, that is what is being communicated to the audience through the movie, using these montages and using these like slight reactions to what happens in the movie. I think that makes sense, and that is something that I think could be respectable, but I don't think it is done in an organic or successful way. And
this podcast was edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find links to all of our shows at ObsessiveViewer.com/podcasts. For exclusive bonus content, including reviews, commentaries, and B-roll episodes, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.